Hi everyone, Evan Alexander here. Thanks for joining me. Today I want to kick off a new series about improving your renders. But before we talk about technique or software, lighting, materials, I want to take just a minute to talk about time. I think time is the secret sauce to making good renders. And it's something I don't hear people talk about very often. So we're all really busy, and clients seem to give us kind of shorter and shorter deadlines, and we're just in this hustle culture now where everybody's doing too many things. And I know it seems like a really basic idea, give me more time and I will produce better work. But I think we can look at it really kind of specifically to rendering and try to understand how the mindset of time can make a real difference in the quality of the work that we produce. So I want to cover a lot of different things in this series. I have a lot of different ideas, and we'll certainly get into more technical aspects of using software and editing images and kind of the ideas and philosophy behind that. But before we do that, I want to just look at time as kind of an element of the renderings. So I'm going to walk you through a few projects, and we'll look at their evolution and kind of how and where time fits into improving the quality of the work. And hopefully you can take some of these ideas and then fold them back into your workflow and start to see the benefits of it and understand why and how this can improve your work. The first project I want to look at is Jesus Christ Superstar Live. This was on NBC. We started it in 2017 and it aired in 2018. Starred John Legend and Sarah Bareilles and even Alice Cooper. And Jason Ardzoni West was the production designer on this. This was actually the first time that we had worked together. So on top of tackling this project, we were trying to figure out how to work together as well. So here's some of the final renders. So obviously these are a few years old now, and I always look at these things and see things that I want to fix and change. It's hard to look at old work, but I thought these were pretty good and kind of showed the depth of the stage, what we were trying to achieve on camera, all the different kind of lighting. Jason had really strong ideas about lighting, and what's one of the great things about working in 3D is that you're able to really kind of explore those things. And so we worked on this project over about 3.5 or 4 months, I want to say. And so the first kind of time aspect to talk about here really is just having time and taking advantage of these projects, these long-term projects where you get to really kind of have design development. So as we look at these kind of final renders, I think the thing that's really important to understand is that these renders didn't happen overnight. They didn't happen quickly, and they certainly weren't the first pass at kind of designing this. This is my kind of render folder for the project. And each one of these subfolders has probably 20 or 30 different renders, test renders, experiments, and everything. So it takes a lot to kind of get things up to that kind of level of render. If we look at the beginning here, this is the first render that we ever did. Obviously, the set design is in early phases of development, so it was not that I was handed kind of a finished design to render. We were very much in process. And so it's not great. It does not start always in a good place. There's really no sense of lighting just kind of a general wash. The wood on the scaffolding looks terrible. Everything's kind of washed out, but you have to start somewhere, and it will get better with time and more development. But this is kind of what you have to do. Here's a few more views of it as the design kind of kept evolving. And so at first, we're really just trying to get the geometry together. And I'm not so worried about making beautiful renderings kind of right out of the gate, because it's a process. And I mean, not to be cliche, but it is a marathon and not a sprint on this one. And so with a set this kind of large and this elaborate, there's really just no way to be able to kind of, put some really kick-ass renderings out on day one. Now, somebody can do that, but not me. So this is just kind of where we start. We're really kind of getting our ground, the feet underneath us, our feet on the ground is what I'm trying to say, and to understand kind of what the design really is. Because at this point, we've been kicking around ground plans and, pencil sketches, and now we're starting to kind of really see it kind of take form. At some point then, we started to add in lighting, and this is where things start then to get really interesting. And I think this was a big moment for Jason, both for the design and for kind of our working together, because I think now can see that these kind of large lighting ideas that he had in his head maybe are going to actually work and be exciting, because he really was trying to think of this whole set kind of as a gobo. And then also just in our kind of working relationship of, why did I hire this guy? To now see that, we can bring lighting and kind of geometry together to start to give you a better sense of like what's going on. And so as I progress through these, you can see not only things like the lighting improving, the artwork and the textures improving, but slowly but surely the venue's getting rounded out, the audience is starting to kind of come into play, and we're able to kind of look, especially through lighting, at different variations and different ideas of how the set is going to kind of permeate, and how we can kind of quickly iterate and kind of put together different looks. And we can also start to look at things from the point of view of a camera and start to get in tight and look at, kind of framed shots with two people instead of just these big kind of broad, more kind of theatrical looking shots here. We did a lot of white model work as well to kind of show us how to, how the set would be just kind of as an object in space to understand. And then also some really tight details to get in and start looking at texturing more closely and to understand kind of what the paint finish, on all of this stuff is going to be. And then, we can even explore more kind of lighting looks as that progresses. So by the time we get to the end and we start to get to, maybe the final renderings that you would see on my website or in the press, that's now 3 months of work and maybe 1,000 renders into the whole process. So time here is an element where as the design develops, the renderings develop also. We keep building off of the files that we've been working with all this time to improve. And so every round, not only do we get closer to Jason's ideas, but technically I'm able to just get, more finesse on the geometry, more texture work in there, a better sense of lighting, different camera work. So it really takes like all that time for all these different things to come together. So the first aspect of time on some of these projects is just having enough time to kind of have a process. And I think too many people are too hard on themselves in trying to achieve work of a certain level in 2 days, in an afternoon, in 3 days. And I understand that, sometimes that's all you have and that's all you have to work with. But in the long run, if you really want the work to shine, it has to go through lots and lots of iterations, and you have to just keep doing more and more renders. And that is going to take time. So for Jesus Christ Superstar, we talked about time kind of on the longer end, the calendar of design development. But now I want to talk a little bit about time in regard to assets, asset creation, asset acquisition, and all the timing that goes into finding the stuff, assembling the stuff. And so what are we talking about here? I think really we're talking about set dressing here more than anything. This is 30-Minute Meals with Rachel Ray. This was from 2019. The designer is Amy Gavin. And the idea here was, instead of doing a big studio set that Rachel had done for a few years, they decided to rent a loft in Brooklyn that existed. And they hired Amy to modify it, to dress it, and to make some minor modifications. And they basically turned it into a TV studio. So these are some of the final shots. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff in there. And so it took a long time for us to not only to design it, but also then for me to actually kind of execute it. And I think I can safely say that both Amy and I underestimated just how much time it would take. However, time well spent, I think, because, you end up with a very good looking product at the end, and you really get a sense of how you want it to look. And then I think ultimately you are saving time on the actual production end, because you're giving the set dressers and the art directors a clear sense of where you want to go, not just an idea or a mood board or any of that stuff. But all of the stuff has to be developed, and of course that takes time. So the first thing we did was just start out by building out the raw space. So before we even did any set design, any production design, I had to just get a 3D model into Baseline. Now, as you can imagine, as like an Airbnb, all I had was photographs and sort of a ground plan, but not really, not CAD drawings. So the first thing that I had to do was just come in and actually build out kind of the raw venue. And, that takes time. And then as we started to get things in shape, Amy and I started talking about modifications. Specifically here, she wanted to add this pantry on the left side that was going to be a visible kind of element to it. And so we keep developing the model. Eventually here we get into textures and start to just kind of build out a baseline of what it is. So she was adding these glass panels to the front of the shelving, adding in these doors into what was another room, but would, for us become a pantry, and for us thinking about lighting. And so I'm taking all this time to kind of build this stuff out. But then we start to actually get into set dressings. And so I think what happens a lot on projects like this are that I think people radically underestimate how much time it's going to take to kind of create or even find and buy all of these assets. It's the number one thing that I see my students struggle with. And it takes a lot of time just to kind of find to this stuff and then, always to kind of clean it up. So I was buying lots of kits off of TurboSquid for, kitchen dressing. Fortunately, this particular stuff is not hard to find, but every single piece of it needs to be touched and handled and, scaled properly and textured and then placed. So I was buying these, kits of OBJ or FBX. None of it really came in as, this is Corona with inside of Cinema 4D. And so I don't think any of it came in that way. So I had to do this whole process of just finding the stuff, getting it loaded in, scaling it correctly, making sure that the axes are pointed up in the right direction, getting the metallics dialed in on the materials, and then starting to place them. So by the time I get to this level, I'm exhausted. Right? It's, and if you look at it, you think, well, there's some stuff there, but it looks sparse, right? It looks like they're either halfway through loading in or halfway through loading out. And I certainly never presented this to Amy saying, here you go, this is the final version. But I think it was at this point that we realized, like, wow, this is going to be a lot more work than, any of us had ever imagined. And so you hit a point as a 3D artist, I think, where you just kind of stop being able to really see it as a rendering, and you kind of lose your design eye or your photography eye, your cinematographer eye, whatever you want to call it. And you just get kind of bogged down into like all of these details. And this is where working with a really great designer can make a difference, because somebody like Amy is really good at keeping her eye on the prize of the final picture and can know how to kind of calmly give good feedback and kind of understand how to kind of direct me to get it to be the place where we kind of want it to be. So here's kind of the next evolution. And you can see there's a lot more stuff. We're much closer to kind of the final product, and it's starting to kind of feel better, right? And we're still adding stuff. We're still modifying things, changing things. Lighting is always improving, right? We're starting to get actual Rachel like cutouts in there. And so it's getting closer, but it's really a matter of time to kind of keep it moving along in the right way so that by the time we get to what is kind of the final product of what we achieved, that we're able to kind of get everything in there that she wants. So this was a huge learning curve for me. And so I want you to just make sure that when you're reading a brief or you're kind of looking at a sketch, that you start to think about this properly and you understand that it's going to take a lot of time, even though you're thinking like, well, we're just going to buy this stuff. I'm not going to start modeling Pellegrino bottles. But it's never that simple, right? It's pretty rare that you just buy something and drop it into a scene. It happens, and I love those assets when they do. But chances are you're going to have to touch everything. And that just takes a lot of time. And so the more you do this, the better you'll get at understanding that process and how to estimate for it, how to make sure that you're billing for it properly. And then in the end, everybody is going to get a better product out of it. I want to talk now about, I think, what is the most important aspect of time in renderings, and that is taking time to walk away from your renders. To me, this has been kind of the thing that has improved my work the most and has really opened my eyes to kind of getting in your own way as an artist while you're creating stuff, especially if you're working in digital design, which can be very technical. So let's look at some images I made last year. Joran Candell, who runs a great website called The Pixel Lab, was having a texturing contest, and I happened to have a few free moments, so I thought I would get in on this. He gave us all a model of this Jaguar, and the assignment was really to just texture it and render it and, see who could do the best job of it. That was it for the brief. There were no real guidelines to it. And so I started in with this image, and I liked it a lot. I was very pleased. I did some detail work to kind of show some of the finer details and imperfections inside the render, and I tried to show some different cameras and point of view. And I don't know, this took a while. I was given the model, but I had to build the textures and then the lighting and then do the camera work. And so I don't know, maybe this was a day, maybe this was 2 days. I think I spread it out with free time I had here and there. But I got to this point where I had these images done, and the impulse, of course, is to send them in. You get something done, and you really just want to share it, right? You want to post it to Instagram, you want to send it to the client, you want to just kind of get it you want approval. You're looking for approval is what you're looking for. But in this case, what I did is I put the images away for about 2 days. And then when I came back to them, I still was pleased with them, but I had kind of a bigger idea, and I thought it would be more fun to maybe tell more of a story with the images. So instead of just doing kind of a straight photo shoot, I thought it would be more fun to kind of build the photo shoot studio as well and put the car in it. So maybe this is because I'm a product of the theater. I don't know. But to me, the more interesting images are ones that tell a story. So cliche as it may be. And so I put more time into it, and I made this. And I thought it was pretty good. I liked it. It was a fair amount of work to kind of turn this stuff around. And again, it was, late in the day, and I had been working on it, and I was really itching to send it off. And I didn't. I paused, and I stopped, and I said, okay, I'm going to sleep on this. And I put it away. And then, because I think what happens is you get so locked into the technical stuff here, right? So we're working so hard to make sure that the cables look organic enough and that they're not sinking into the floor, and that the lighting is looking right, and trying to get the fabric on the Lamborghini to drape the proper way. I don't know if I ever got it to actually do that, and I just think what happens is your brain starts to get so overwhelmed by this technical stuff that you stop looking at the image as a designer or as an artist, as a creator, as a cinematographer, whatever you want to call it. And you've literally scrambled your brain, right? This is like what happens to my daughter when she watches too much YouTube. Like you can't kind of see the world clearly. And so I stopped and I tucked it away, And then I came back to it a day or two later, and I just thought, I can improve this. And it wasn't even so much about the technical side of it, the car paint or the materials. It was more that I was never fully satisfied with this kind of black wall with the vertical fluorescent tubes in the back there. It looked kind of weird. I mean, the whole space is kind of weird. It was kind of Frankenstein together from some various other projects that I had kind of worked on. And I wanted to tell a story, but I kind of didn't really have a story other than, instead of showing the final product of the photo shoot, here was the car kind of, getting ready to be shot. And then I decided to kind of rework it. Don't ask me why, but this is then where we kind of went to. This kind of horror movie idea. And whether you think that's a good idea or not, what it was for me was this idea of stepping away from it and coming back to it with fresh eyes and a fresh brain, where I was able to, in this case, enhance the story, which I think improves the render. So this was the final version that I sent off. And I think that the real lesson here is, when you're scrambling, when you've been kind of grinding all day, all night, for 3 days in a row, the most critical thing that you can do is stop, put it away, work on something else, or even better, like take a day off, go somewhere, do something, like stay away from a computer, and then come back to it. And you will see it with different eyes. And maybe you'll fix something technical. Maybe you'll enhance the story and kind of move the whole image forward. So think about the time away from the project as being just as important as the time that you put into the project. Speaking of time, I think this tutorial's had enough of it. Thanks for joining me in my deep dive therapy session today about rendering. So, I know a lot of projects happen really quickly. You don't have 3 months to put together a project. Sometimes you have a day or 3 hours to put a project together. But I do think that if you can try to just change your brain space a little bit towards the end there, you can, really produce something that looks better and feels better overall. And when you're estimating projects, make sure that you're really being honest about how long it's going to take to kind of put together those stock assets, and how to, manage your time in a way that's more reasonable for your life and your health and the overall quality of the project. All right, more in this series to come. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.